we do have a really important interview to get to, covering one of our biggest stories, of course, around Arizona, the United States, and the world.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Nancy Guthrie and the case. Of course, she's been missing now for 9 days, and the search for her as well. And there are a lot of different things happening. The FBI is now involved in this search. And let me go ahead and pull up some of this video, because the newest thing that we have are authorities checking a septic tank in the back of her property. We do have a very special guest here with us this morning to hopefully shed a little bit of light on this. We have Lance Leising. Lance, good morning to you.
Hi, Lance. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You have worked for over 30 years in crisis management, physical security, investigations, with legal implications, and you're currently the vice president of physical security for Site Metric. What can you tell us about? Can you give us any insight in terms of why they may be searching that septic tank behind her home?
Sure. Well, before my previous job, I was an FBI agent for 23 years, and I ran the FBI Phoenix's Violent Crime Task Force. So we dealt with cases like this, not exactly like this. This is a very unique case, very rare. So going back to the septic, so there are a couple things here. One, they're going back to the scene of the crime multiple times. That's not ideal in a case, but it does happen. It's not unheard of. It's an evolving case. Different tips will lead you to different things, and you may have thought you covered everything at the scene and then have to go back again. It would have been better if they probably would have maintained and held on to that scene the entire time, expecting something like this. But the fact that they're back there just means they have a lead or a tip, or they realized there was something else they needed to do that they didn't do the first time. The septic search that you see, or at least from the video that I've seen here, it's not a detailed search. If you're really searching a septic tank or system, you're doing more than just with a stick. You're likely digging that whole system up and searching that whole thing. And I've been involved in a few of those cases. You would see a lot more activity at that scene than just somebody at the septic. But they are looking in there, and probably because they didn't check it the first time, and they're checking it now.
What would they be checking it for? I mean, with your years of experience in the FBI, why would one lift the lid to the septic and start digging around in there? Why would they dig it up? Potential evidence, a potential body? What could potentially be down in that septic?
Definitely potential evidence. So that's what they would be looking there for. So whenever you flush a toilet or anything, it's going into that septic system. Flushing evidence at a scene is not unheard of from somebody at crime. So like, let's say they used gloves in there, they were trying to get rid of them or something like that. It wouldn't be smart of them, but they could have potentially flushed something. So maybe they're looking for something, evidence like that, something less than a body. But a body is, a septic tank is somewhere you would look for a body. In the way they're doing it now, they're just peripherally searching that septic system and not really thoroughly searching it. I would expect bulldozers and heavy equipment out there if they're doing a full search.
You know, something as well, have you seen, and I'm glad you mentioned that you'd worked with the FBI for so long, is it normal to have some of the frustrations of the neighbors there in the neighborhood is that the crime tape goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down. Once I can understand with the FBI then getting involved and saying we need to search, but is that typically something that you may see at a scene if you have so many different agencies involved?
I've definitely seen it in the past, so it's not unheard of. It's not ideal, though. You don't want that. Like I was saying before, it would have been best if they would have just maintained this possession of this crime scene indefinitely, and they probably could have. I don't think anybody else lives there. The family probably would have been okay with them maintaining that crime scene. It would have involved resources. They would have had to have somebody out there to maintain the security of it, but they probably should have kept it that way. That's from an outsider looking in, I would think that. But going back to a crime scene, I've done it multiple times in my case. I did it once for a bank robbery case where we searched the residence twice and did not find the stash of money. But eventually we got a tip that identified where it was, and it was in a location we wouldn't have traditionally searched. So we went back a third time and we found it. So it does happen. It's an evolving case. They're going to go with where the tips that lead them, and they likely got a tip that brought them back.
Monday morning quarterbacking, right? We all look back and say we should have, we could have. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you see them doing correct that could lead to the recovery of Mrs. Guthrie, but also talk a little bit about these messages that the family is putting out. It does seem like, especially in the second one, if you have seen it, somewhat cryptic, and it does look like they are talking directly to someone, answering some type of note question that we don't have all that information to. Does that make sense?
It makes tons of sense. So let me try to answer both the questions. So as far as what they're doing right, I see a lot of what they're doing right. I see diligent, objective investigators taking everything seriously and going down every path, bringing in multiple agencies as experts. That's absolutely correct. Working in a task force setting with those agencies, as long as it's an organized investigation, that's correct. So all those are right. The ransom notes. Now, we need to look at those ransom notes as one facet to a very complex investigation. From what I'm seeing in the family statements, the two that were issued, and what we know about what was in the ransom notes, they are just leads of many leads. They're taking them seriously, and they have to assume it's legitimate. But I think there are indicators they are not legitimate. But as good investigators, they're pursuing both. So let me talk a little bit about the most recent ransom note.
Mm-hmm.
It's markedly different than the first. In the first ransom note, it followed crisis or kidnapping negotiations 101. Humanizing the victim, humanizing the family members that are looking for the victim, wanting her back, trying to get an open line of communication that provides proof of life. All of those are exactly what you would expect with a family that's really cooperating with law enforcement and a law enforcement agency that's knowledgeably coaching them. The second family statement, much different. They were not speaking directly to the victim anymore. They were speaking only to the kidnappers. That's a huge change. They used some terminology that I think is indicative. They started with saying, "We understand." So that's something in the second ransom note that we're not privy to, but they understand what was said. They're not negotiating. They're saying, "We understand." Then they talk about returning her, not releasing her, but returning her. And then they also talk about celebrating with her and willing to pay. So all of those are really indicative and probably crafted very explicitly. They wanted those words to be that way. So they're not talking to the victim. They're talking directly to kidnappers, still trying to get a line of communication open, still trying to understand what that payment might mean, but they want her returned. So you could read a lot into it, but in the end, whatever you read into it, whatever assumption you make, understand that that is one facet of a large investigation, and these ransom notes may not be legitimate at all, but they're treating it as if they are.
You know, something else that folks have been talking about. I mean, anything and almost anything can be traced digitally these days.
Emails.
Two questions for you. One is the ransom note that was sent to the media. Can that be traced? And two, lots of people have been talking as well about Bitcoin, that was what they asked. That can also be easily traced. Is that true?
Both can be traced. Easily is subjective there. So technology is a double-edged sword. It works well for law enforcement. You have a lot of different technology, a lot of abilities to track certain things, whether that's cell phones to cars, whatever it happens to be. But it also works to the kidnappers' favor as well. They've got technology that works to anonymize, that works to help keep them concealed, especially through multiple anonymizing services or multiple IP address routers. So it can be very difficult to track an email, but it can be done. Usually you get to some evidence. Usually you don't get to a home IP address that brings you directly to where the kidnappers are, but you get some indication of why they're using what they're using and the route they're coming from. If it's international versus domestic, like you can really narrow in on something about that kidnapper. And I'm sure the FBI has some of that information that they've not released. But bringing you directly to where the victim's held, that's probably rare and nothing that we would expect in a case like this, if it's legitimate.
Lance, we have a comment in the chat from Darla Nickel 93 saying maybe something the kidnappers demanded was for them to take the tape down, go away, so the kidnappers can go back or something, and told the cops when to go back and where to specifically look. I mean, we have seen instances where the suspect will communicate with law enforcement in such a way.
So that's what law enforcement wants. They want that open line of communication. If they're communicating in that way, they want that. They really don't want that through media outlets or third parties. They want that direct line of communication. There are cases, rare though they may be, where a suspect may go back to the scene of the crime. In this case, I hesitate to say anything won't happen because there have been so many twists and turns in this case that are unexpected and rare. But I would be extremely surprised if the communication was take down that crime scene tape and leave, because the kidnappers needed to come back in some fashion. I think it was more likely direction about maybe what's happened, why they cannot provide proof of life, and maybe it's some direction more on meeting this last deadline, which is today.
If we could ask this question here, we have a break coming up in about 2 minutes, so I want to make sure to get this in there as well. So, can you talk about the pacemaker connection? The fact that that's how they knew, it was connected to her phone. That's how it helped in the timeline of events. Have some of these medical devices helped in any way with some of the timelines with cases? And, does it help or hurt, or what are your thoughts on this?
So helps tremendously. First of all, a timeline is critical in an investigation like this. That's the first thing as an investigator you're going to look to narrow down is that timeline. And you're using timestamps from surveillance videos. You're using call logs on cell phones. You're using the Uber delivery driver drop-off time. And then you're using anything on her phone. And her phone was left behind at the scene. Anything on her phone that would provide some timestamp or information. The pacemaker being connected from her phone to the actual pacemaker is one of those examples. And there may be others, but that's one of the examples. So now when you put it all together, that timeline together, you have a person indicated on a camera and a camera being disconnected. And then you have, I think it's about a 45-minute span where you have the pacemaker disconnecting from the phone. So you've got somebody at the house, or possibly somebody at the house. You have something happening to a camera, which doesn't normally happen. It's broken. So that indicates somebody's there and something nefarious is happening. And then at the far end of the timeline, you've got the pacemaker disconnecting from the phone, meaning the pacemaker probably left the range of the phone and can no longer talk to it. So right there, you have your timeline. I think it's about 45 minutes. That is, like I said, golden for an investigator, because now you can focus a lot of technical resources on those 45 minutes. You've got a space and time and a location, all to put your technical resources towards. So what happened in those 45 minutes at that house? That's what they're looking at. And that's when technology comes into play. That's where law enforcement has a lot of resources.
Lance, hold with us if you don't mind till after the break. Sure. We just have another question for him. He's worked for the FBI for many years, still works in that type of industry and security, and very knowledgeable when it comes to these type of situations, of course, when we're talking about the Nancy Guthrie case.
So 84 years old, disappeared. It's been 9 days today, Lance, since they've been searching for her. You have 30 years experience. You've covered so many different cases, I imagine, and there's not one that's going to be alike. The outcome of this is not predictable. We can't say what's going to happen at 5 o'clock today, 3 o'clock tomorrow. But looking at it from the cases you've covered, can you in any way make an educated guess as to what will happen in this situation? What could happen?
So any guess I make is just that it's a guess, because we are not privy to a lot of the information. Well, 99% of the information the investigators have. However, when you look at history and you look at percentages and how things work out in cases like this, first of all, there are so many things that have happened in this case that you never see all together in one case. The ransom notes, the age of the victim, the nature of the kidnapping, all of this. But what I see from the scene, when I see a physical forced entry, and then I see something went wrong inside that house, which is evidenced by blood leading outside the house, and not an insignificant amount of blood. There was a decent amount of blood, especially for a victim of this age with already ongoing health issues. If you think that's a kidnapping for a ransom case, either if you do or do not, something went wrong in that house. That was likely not the plan if whoever entered that house was to hurt her in the way that she would be bleeding that badly. And if you did hurt her in that way, holding on to a victim that's fragile, older, has medical issues, and now an injury, and keeping her healthy for a period of time over a week, that is extremely unusual and does not bode well. Investigators usually the 12-hour, 24-hour mark, that's what you're looking at to solve a kidnapping case, not over a week, especially without proof of life. I
spoke with someone who's retired FBI over the weekend, and we were chatting about this case. And she says to me, usually when you have a case with an elderly person, it's somebody they know or somebody related to the family or somebody within their circle of people that they know. As a former FBI agent, do you think that is usually, I know we're kind of talking about theories here, but usually the case when you have the victim is elderly.
If I can add to that, because I was thinking the same thing, what is this all about? Is it about the money, or is someone trying to send some type of message?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, absolutely rare that this would be. It would almost be like it's way more rare than lightning striking you for this to be a true stranger kidnapping of this type of
Mm.
individual for all the complexities that I just talked about with an elderly victim like this. But um, and the second question was, I'm sorry,
What's the
what was the second
motive? I mean,
question?
is it the money,
No, the
or
motive.
is
So let
someone
me
sending a message? I mean, look at who her daughter is and who she's
one
married to.
one of the most unique things in this case is what is that motive? So usually, well, there are multiple motives for kidnappers: financial gain, ideological, it could be just delusional, it could be exploitation, uh, or domestic dispute. Those are pretty much the motives. There are a few others, but that's generally it. The only two that involve ransom demands or some kind of statement are the ideological or financial gains. So you're communicating to try to get money, or you're just trying to make a statement. So the ransom notes indicate financial gain. However, the the financial gain request went to media outlets, which is usually reserved for ideological motivated kidnappings. With a financial gain, they should go straight to the family or straight to law enforcement because that's who's going to be paying them. So the motive here is unusual. I would percentages are that it's not either of those two, ideological or financial gain.
Hmm.
Percentages are somebody she knows or a person that knows of her through
Mhm.
maybe a worker that's been at the house, somebody that saw her in the community, thinks she has a lot of money, went in with one intention, then things went wrong and they had to do something else. So that's more than likely percentage wise what would have happened here. However, hard to predict.
Yeah.
All right, Lance Leising, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. You served in the FBI for many years now, still working in the technology and security world, and you've been a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. Have a great day. We hope to have you back.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you.